simple message: our members should get involved in the UPC. That's what we're all about. That's what the committee is trying to do.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the two IPs in a pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
So, Gwilym, I've been spending a lot of my time in San Diego in my hotel gym running and stuff, but I understand that you've been out on the streets.
A little bit, yeah, and I feel like we've been a bit rude about little bits of San Diego because the weather was grim and it was like being in Rill, and I went on about that, even though we're right by Tijuana.
So I thought I said Portsmouth rather than Rill, but
yeah, well, we
I'm going to add battleships.
Our own points of reference of it. But actually, we have not talked about the good bits. The sun's out now. And it's
the sun is amazing. Awesome. Yeah, it's quite warm out there, isn't it? Yeah.
We're on this cool street. We're in the gas lamp
area.
Yeah. There's a big street full of bars and things. And
it's quite lively.
Baseball game the other day, rammed full of San Diego Padres fans.
I know nothing about baseball.
Happy hats.
Baseball is wasted on me.
I think it's just like cricket, but standing up.
Let's not get started on that. You're going to be a loser. You're going to be a loser.
Fine. But no, and I have to say, I've been because you run on the treadmill.
I do, yeah. My knees are gone. I can't do it.
I get that. I thought I'd give it a go and been running around because the conference centre, which is enormous, it's the size of a spaceship.
Yeah.
I'm not a little spaceship, but in the size of a big space. That's not very helpful.
No. Yeah.
Imagine a spaceship the size of a convention centre.
Then that's how big it is.
That's how big it is. Amazing. But you're running all around it, and the other side is the bay, and it is actually super pretty.
Yeah.
It's quite posh boats as well.
So I was walking around the convention centre at the back end of it the other day, on a lovely walk down to Seaport, and I came across a highly respected CIPA luminary.
Ooh.
And he's with us today.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, way.
Oh, let's podcast with them.
So we have council member and chair of the UPC committee, Rob Jackson. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Lee.
So it's lovely to have you on. We've not had you on before, have we?
No, never. I've never been on any podcast.
Ever. But you're quite good at talking, aren't you? So which is the prerequisite.
Barely a word passes my lips.
So we generally start these off with perhaps you tell us a wee bit about your backstory. So where it all started, how you found yourself in the world of IP, that sort of thing, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Almost by accident, I guess.
Everyone says that.
Yeah. I was a slightly strange child. I was sort of reasonably good at both humanities and sciences, but not brilliant at either. I did science A-levels, because you can figure out the answers to those questions without having to do too much homework.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So that's quite good. But I always had a bit of interest in the law.
Yeah.
So when it came to choosing what to do, I sort of dithered between sciences, engineering, or possibly the law. I ended up going to university to do physics, but also had a bit of a hankering for legal work. One of my friends at university was studying law, and I sort of found he talked about some of his assignments, and they somehow seemed more interesting than quantum mechanics. So that kind of got me thinking, and I left university still not having figured out what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So I spent a year sort of dithering and travelling. I had a couple of part-time jobs. And it was actually my mum that came up with being patent attorney, because I'd never met one. I'd no idea. I'd never heard of the job.
You never met your mum?
Sorry. I don't know where to go with that.
How does she know about patents?
Well, she was a legal secretary.
Oh, okay.
So, although funnily enough, I do have this vague recollection as a child asking her what Pat Penned meant on the back of my Lego bricks. And weirdly, she actually knew that meant... Yeah. So I don't know where that came from. But anyway, she was a legal secretary in a small town where I grew up. Traditional sort of wills and divorces kind of practice.
Yeah.
But it just happened that her boss in this small practice had been at school with a guy who was a partner in one of the well-known patent attorney firms.
You can name them.
I think it was Abel and Imrie. I'm not 100% sure. I think it was Abel and Imrie. And Mum just came home from work one day with a letterhead, because once in a while this guy would have people coming in who invented something, and he knew nothing about patents. So Mum came home with a letterhead, as I say, I think it was Abel and Imrie, and said, "Oh, you might be interested in this." So I was, and I fired off a letter to the Institute office, and they sent out some little leaflets about being a patent attorney and various other things. And there was a service where they would put you in touch with a local firm. I don't know if they still do that.
But we would do that, yeah.
So it was great. So they sent me off, I think it was a small practice in Stockport. And I went there and spent a day there and just thought it was fascinating. So the guys there did a great job of interesting me in the profession. And I just thought, I think I'll go for that. So I fired off a few job application letters, not knowing, really much about it. I just did a bit of research. God knows how I found them. I think it was probably through a list from CIPA. Wrote off to half a dozen firms, and a couple of them had no jobs. A couple of them offered me interviews. I think only one turned me down completely. And went off and did a couple of interviews and got a couple of job offers.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where did you start off? Where was first gig?
Same place I am now.
Oh, Danes.
Yep, I've always been at Danes.
In London.
In London. Yeah. I'll tell you the funny thing, actually, that what got me both job offers was one great thing about my old high school. It was a state comprehensive just south of Manchester. It had originally been a secondary modern school, a technical school.
Yeah.
So they had the most fantastic woodwork and metal workshops.
Remember them well.
Yeah, and that was before they'd invented health and safety.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So what that meant was that if you got on well with the teachers, they'd let you go in and use all that kit during your lunch hour.
Yeah.
So I would, and it also helped that I borrowed one of the keys to the tool padlocks. So I had an unofficial copy of the tool cupboard key on my key ring. So we just nip in and, I'm going to say tools, I mean, industrial sized lathes, end mills, oxyacetylene, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And one of my best friends from school and I, he went on to become a successful petroleum engineer and worked for an investment company, he and I made ourselves a motorbike out of a broken bicycle and a lawnmower. So this is when we were, I think we were in lower sixth when we did this. And this thing went, it wasn't the most reliable motorbike you've ever seen.
You think not, yeah.
But it would do 25 miles an hour. And again, because health and safety hadn't been invented.
And cut the grass.
Only if you disassembled it. So that would have been good. So rather wonderfully, the teachers were more than happy for us to motor this thing around the school playground during breaks and whiz it up and down this path called the link path between two school sites.
Yeah.
So it was great. So the reason I mention that is we took photographs of it, and when it came a few years later going for job interviews, and some senior partner at the interview would say, well, I see you've got a physics degree, but, do you know any practical stuff? I whipped out the photographs and said, well, I made this, and I think that probably got me a couple of job offers.
Fantastic.
So this is one of those times when you've got another physicist on the podcast. You feel at home? Do you feel
happy? Happy. Although I didn't get quantum. Did you get quantum physics? Because I didn't.
Oh yeah, we had to do quantum physics. I mean, did I get it and did I understand it? No. But there wasn't that expression that was it Einstein or somebody? I can't remember. Somebody said if you think you understand quantum physics, you don't understand it.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
So we must understand it because we don't.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, you've lost me.
It's uncertainty. That's what we thrive on.
Yeah.
So what was the training like?
It wasn't bad.
I only asked that question because I know that you are an advocate of training.
I am. It was good in the sense that you got stuck in, you worked for a number of different people, which we still do, and it meant that you learnt there was more than one way to skin the proverbial cat. And it was great. I always liked the place. It's always been a place I've enjoyed working. It wasn't terribly formalised. It was all a little bit random. You just got things thrown at you. It was a bit sink or swim. I suggest it probably didn't comply with any kind of ideas of good practice regarding teaching, but sort of it worked. What you did get was a lot of time with some smart people who were not too... I mean, Danes is a fairly laid-back firm in terms of personal relations, and funnily enough, I remember somebody saying to me after I'd been offered the job and discovering I hadn't been to Oxbridge, sort of, weren't you concerned about that? Because apparently at the time, if you hadn't been to Oxford, you weren't going to get a job.
Yeah.
But fortunately, nobody told me that. And Danes was fairly laid back about that kind of thing. They weren't all Oxbridge types, so I fitted in pretty well. And I must have been trained all right because I passed them all my exams first time round and became a patent attorney.
I've seen you describe training as an apprenticeship.
Yes, I think it is.
Yeah, I agree completely. By the way, because you're learning on
by
the
doing.
job, and
learning by doing.
Absolutely,
it's the very definition of an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
But it interests me. I think the educationalists are not sure what they think about that. You're an educationalist.
I'm an educationalist. I am.
What do you think about that?
So I think there are different ways you can cut an apprenticeship. So you can look at that traditional model where you do the kind of the theory and the learning in a college-based or university-based way, and you do the practice on the job, and that's an apprenticeship. But I don't think you can argue that what we do is any different. Yeah, so the theory, the learning may come in a different way. It may be more organic. It may be more down to the individual in terms of the way they pick that up. But in terms of the application of that learning into sort of like real life practical settings, it's absolutely an apprenticeship. Yeah, I agree entirely.
I think my personal thinking is that you need to do extra book work to get through the exams, but for me to know what you don't know. You know what I mean? But certainly the stuff that I implement most days comes from that apprenticeship.
Yeah. And we got sent on the then Queen Mary and Westfield College certificate course, which I loved. And I was... It was something about news. I got sent on that after a couple of weeks. I was supposed to go after a year, and then some reason I was sent off straight away. And actually, having had a year out, absolutely loved it, because all of a sudden I was back at university being paid money to do stuff that was easier than doing physics. So that all seemed good. But yeah, we've got all that. So the theory background there was good to have that kind of grounding from the start. But then, it's learning by doing. I mean, the only way you can learn to write a patent is to write a patent and have somebody tell you what you've done wrong and have another go. Keep on doing it, I think. I don't know of any other way. And
it's actually, in terms of a profession, it's quite a difficult profession for you to see it working in any other way. So I'll be honest. So I came to CIPA, as you know, like 13 years ago now, and I struggled early days to get my head around the model.
Yeah.
But once you understand that you're taking people who are highly adept, highly qualified in their technical field, who've done the hard years in university. Yeah, I get that QM and other courses have got their value in terms of that initial introduction to the law. Understand that entirely, and see the value in that. But the reality is, these are people that don't want to spend a significant amount of their lives back in university. They want to learn on the job.
Yeah,
they want to learn that way. We need them to learn that way. It's a perfect marriage.
Yeah. I think it is. I mean, also, having now being on the other side of the fence, and I'm doing the recruiting. It's really important not to fall into the trap of thinking that because you're a brilliant physicist, you're going to be a brilliant patent attorney.
Yeah.
It's a necessary to be sort of reasonably competent at sciencey stuff is a necessary condition for the job. Certainly, it's a long way from being a sufficient one. You've got to have that. I mean, it's probably why it suited to me, because I wasn't a particularly great scientist, but I was good enough. But I was pretty good at the humanities stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I think you do need to hire people who are interested in the law. And I remember people sort of complaining about failing the exams and sort of saying, "Well, I got a first-class degree and I've got a PhD and all these qualifications in physics."
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's a very different skill. So I think you've got to pick people who've got that range of interests and abilities. Don't necessarily have to be brilliant at any one thing, but you've got to be able to, have that mix of skills. But once you've got that, in terms of, there's the law to learn, but in terms of the practical skills like writing a patent application, it'd be like trying to learn how to build a brick wall from a book. Until you pick up some bricks and some mortar, how are you ever going to do it? You just got to have a go.
Make a few mistakes.
Make some mistakes, knock it down, and start again.
Yeah.
That's anyway.
And I know you're quite proud about the way Danes trains today.
Yes, I am.
And so what's changed, or has it changed? Do you do things differently?
Not in principle, no. It's a little bit more structured. I think we have, some of the sort of rough edges that were there when it was a smaller firm when I joined.
More formalised?
Yes, there's more structure. We have clearer objectives about where trainees ought to be at a certain point. There are more courses that we involve people on, which I think is good. I mean, when I was studying for my finals, you got the black book, which for those who aren't familiar with UK practice is a large black book.
Yeah, Guide to the Patents Act, yeah.
And the Guide to the Patents Act, and you just started at the front and read through it and took notes, and it was very much self-study. There's a lot more structure. We're much better, I think, at giving people tutorials and generally structuring things. But ultimately, it is down to the candidate to prepare themselves with the feedback from the partners. And I think really the main thing we do is just make sure people have exposure as much as we can to the right work, and take the time. Face to face.
Yeah.
And it might not be very fashionable, but personally, I like that to be face to face in real life, not over a screen. So, I try to be in the office, 4 days a week at least, talking to people. I can't always do it. Sometimes I'm here, but trying to spend the time with people and just give people feedback on their work. And that hasn't changed.
And also within that, presumably helping people to understand that they're ready or they're not ready.
That's critical. I mean, the other. What should I say? My other hobby horse out of several hobby horses is the idea, the sort of idea that's got around that our final exams are some kind of lottery, and that the key to success is just buying lots of tickets,
taking them out.
I would take completely the opposite view, which is you really don't want to do them more than once. It's not a fun way to spend your life. When I'd done them, I never wanted to do them again. And somebody very wisely, I remember asking at sort of, I can't remember what it was now, 2.5 years in, I can't remember, should I take them at that stage? And I was getting good feedback. They said, no, wait till you've been working, 3 and a bit years or whatever.
Yeah.
which is what I did, and I got good marks. I passed them, and I'm so grateful because even if I'd passed two of the papers the year before, it's another year of your life where your head's in the books, it's miserable, you're young, you don't want to be doing
and
more than that.
There's nothing more disheartening than failing either, is there?
Particularly from amongst people who aren't used to failing.
Yeah.
We're not really recruiting people who are, they've probably never failed an exam.
Do you find that the way that people are taught through primary, tertiary, secondary, primary, secondary,
it's close, yeah.
1, 2, 3, whatever that order is, that's changed? Do you think that's changed the way that people approach how we train? Because they come in with different expectations of how they're going to be taught.
Yeah, I mean, it's the difference now. I think they actually are taught to some extent in tertiary now, aren't they? I mean, I remember when I was at university, it was a good university. I did okay, considering how little work I did. Yeah. But the best teaching I got was at the end of the second year when we got the option of doing a workshop course.
Yeah.
Back to the workshops again. And the best teachers in our department were the lab techs.
Yeah.
And I got some fantastic teaching. I mean, I knew the basics of how to, use a lathe and so forth. But those guys, we had a week with them doing a course in case we wanted to build some kit.
Yeah.
I think they were the best teachers in the department
because they were applying the learning in real life situations. That's the essence of good teaching, in my opinion.
I mean, compared to some of the brilliant physicists who would come in, I mean, there was one guy who was notoriously so brilliant that if he dropped a sort of 20-page proof on the floor, it didn't matter which order he picked the pages up in, he'd still be able to understand it. I mean, and unfortunately, people are that smart find it really difficult to understand why normal humans
don't get it. Yeah.
So let's scoot it on a wee bit. Yeah, you've qualified. You're building your practice up in Danes.
Yeah.
At some point, you got yourself interested in the work of CIPA. How did that happen?
I remember that. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, you always tell me it's a long time ago. And one day I will find out for you when it was.
It was, yeah. It was too long ago. But I think CIPA had a bit of a call for younger people to stand for council.
Yeah.
Because we might be a bunch of dinosaurs now, but back then we really, there was some.
I've heard the stories.
Yes, it was really a bit of a seniors club.
Yeah.
And one of the partners I think said we're looking for someone to do this, and they probably knew I was somewhat opinionated and might,
surely not.
So that was it really. Had a go and got elected, and somehow I keep sort of forgetting to stand down. So I've been there ever since.
How do you think it's changed from the Pleistocene era, whatever the name is? Jurassic. We all know Jurassic. Jurassic era.
I'm tempted to pull Lee's leg here, but I'm not
going to. Pull my leg?
No, I won't actually, because I think it's transformed actually in terms of how professional the institute is. I think it's a very different body. I think it's more representative. I think the members of council are more representative of real life.
Definitely.
Patterns. Profession.
Yeah.
We should be looking to represent all members of the institute.
Yeah.
But we do also need to be mindful of the sort of businesses most people work in, and I think we are now much more representative of the broader profession.
Yeah.
So I think that's good.
So in my mind, if we're talking now specifically about council, you need that rich mix of people who are young and new enough to the profession that they're practicing in the modern age and they kind of bring that with them.
Yeah.
But you can't lose the institutional knowledge that people that have been around for... and it's just about getting that right.
Yeah.
And it feels like we've got it right.
I think that's right. Yeah. And I think also, because so many of us have grown up through the profession, we can all kind of remember when we started.
Yeah.
I've still got that memory of going, the box with the dictating machine and the pencil rubber and the pencils and...
Oh, yeah.
It's still, I try and remind myself of what it was like to be a trainee when we're talking about those sorts of issues.
Yeah.
Don't know if we succeed. I guess everybody deludes themselves that about those sorts of things. But I think we're doing pretty well. I mean, there'll still be people moaning that we're out of touch. I'm sure they will. But I think we've got a good mix of people on the council.
I agree. So one of the things that you found yourself doing more recently is leading the work around the Unified Patent Court UPC.
Yeah.
Talk to us a wee bit about that and why that's so important to you and the things that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I've always been interested. It probably ties in with the story I gave you about how I came into the profession. I've always been one of those patent attorneys who's found the legal side of the job slightly more interesting than the technical side. I enjoy both, but it's the fact that it's a legal job that sort of got me into it.
Yeah.
So it always seemed a bit of a shame as a patent prosecutor that you're sort of building something that it's a bit like building a car and never driving it.
Yeah, someone else litigates it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was always thought that's something I'd like to be more involved with. And whenever cases came up where we were assisting in enforcing patents. I always found that really exciting and interesting. And then the opportunity came up years ago. The opportunity came up to qualify as a patent attorney litigator to get higher courts rights. So I was one of the relatively early people to do that. I went off and did the old Nottingham course, which I found really interesting, and I'm very proud of having done that.
Yeah.
And so over the years, I've not done as much of that work as perhaps I would have liked, but I have conducted cases. I conducted the first case, all the way through to trial in our firm without involving solicitors. It was just us and a barrister.
Yeah.
And that was 10 years ago now that trial took place. So I was involved in other matters before then, but that was the first matter that I took all the way through myself.
Yeah.
And it was, it was hard work, but I found it very rewarding. And I've always thought there's a lot of potential cross-fertilisation between what you learn when you're enforcing a patent and what you need to know when you're writing it.
Yeah.
So, so going back to the car analogy, really, until you've driven one, you don't really know how to design one.
Yeah.
So I think in a way, I know there's good practical reasons why people tend to focus on one or the other. But I really think there's a lot, you need to transfer those experiences from enforcement to prosecution. So that was kind of at the back of my mind. Always found that interesting. And then, of course, the UPC came along. It's always struck me as being a great opportunity for a couple of reasons. One, because of the international scope of it and the fact that it gives the UK, as a country within Europe, as being having a leading place in legal professions. It's always seemed like a really good opportunity as a country. But also, because we have in this country, we've got experience of a lot of EPO contentious experience.
Yeah.
And some of us have worked in litigation in the courts as well.
Yeah.
So it became clear that the new system was going to be a little bit of a mixture of those things. So it just seems to me a great opportunity for UK-based patent attorneys to get involved in something that's really important and actually offers something that fixes a lot of problems with the existing system.
Yeah.
In terms of making litigation affordable and efficient. Because UK litigation might be expensive. Quite a number of continental jurisdictions it's awfully slow and maybe not the most reliable of outcomes.
Yeah.
So it really looks like a great opportunity for us as professionals, but generally a good thing.
Yeah.
So I've just always. I hope that makes some sense. I've just always found
it makes sense, but there's a big leap from there in terms of you as a practitioner.
Yeah.
To leading it in the way that you've done.
Yeah.
So why you? I mean, it feels like you were the right person to do it.
Yeah.
Because the things that we're doing are amazing, I think, around UPC at the moment. So why you? And what are the really exciting things that we're doing around UPC?
Well, why me? I suppose it was a little bit of a nobody else stood up. I think I guess I was on council at the right time.
Yeah.
As I say, I had the mixture of someone who's done quite a lot of EPO contentious practice and a reasonable bit of UK litigation. So I guess I had the knowledge of both sides. I've also got a bit of an approach to these things that, I've always felt that some patent attorneys have a little bit of an unnecessary sort of cringe or bow at the knee towards other legal practitioners. And, I don't want to talk down anybody else because, there's some brilliant people in all the different legal professions. But I have sort of felt that certain, I get a little bit annoyed when some patent attorneys sort of think that as soon as they get an assignment or something slightly legal, they have to sort of bounce it off to someone else who may well know no more about it than they do. And I had a few experiences years ago as a trainee or associate where we were involved on cases, and I'd get phone calls from junior solicitors at some big name firms who clearly hadn't the foggiest what was going on. So it really made me think that actually it's not what your job title is, it's how much time you've invested in learning and understanding the system. And I just feel really strongly that patent attorneys have got the ability to understand the case in the whole, in the round. In a way that if your training is focused so much on litigation and you're great at strategy and tactics, you maybe don't have that mindset that just says what's the answer. I know patent attorneys might go to the other extreme, but we do handle a lot of contentious work anyway. So I just think we're really well placed to be doing that kind of work. And then, as I say, when the UPC comes along, it sort of fits our skill set because of the similarities with the EPO. It fits our skill set even better. So what I ended up doing, I think I just felt strongly that someone ought to do it. And I just, I'm the guy on council who can do this.
And so we've had this conversation previously, and I know that that there's some really interesting things that the UPC committee is doing. But I think we were talking a week or two ago about the need for this to be really practical, really hands-on. Nuts and boltsy sort of learning that we do. Say a bit about that?
I will, actually, just a thing I forgot to mention, because what really started this off was actually Matt Dixon's UPC task force.
Yeah.
So I want to give a lot of credit to
Guns
that.
for hire.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was the most important first step, which I really should have mentioned, which was, we had this opportunity for 1 year only to get lots of
as many patent attorneys into the system.
Yeah. Because that's really, everything else follows from that.
Yeah.
And the fantastic outcome of that is that the UK, despite not even being a UPC member state, has the second largest number of UPC representatives that there are. So that's a fantastic starting point. Yeah. But then, as you say, you do require some practical training, and the problem with any area of practice like this is there are lots of books on the law, lots of articles on the law. It's always difficult. I remember finding this from learning litigation.
Yeah.
Because people are generally used to being in a law firm that've got the old outdoor clerks, as they used to call them, who would, sort things out.
Yeah.
There was always a sort of, these things were always done, but nobody really quite knew. There was somebody who did these things. But the nuts and bolt things like how do you issue a claim in a particular court?
Yeah.
That stuff tends to be missing from the books.
So you even described it to me simpler than that. How do you find the court?
Yes.
Where is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And I realised this was an issue even going back to the old days of the Patents County Court before it was IPA. And there was this, I remember CIPA put on a fantastic seminar where a guy came and just explained what you do. Because in those days, in order to issue a claim, you had to go to the old Regent's something or other, near Regent's Park. There's a county court up there. And it was a lovely Regency Crescent, and you had to go into one building and pay a fee, and then they'd stamp something, and then go to another building down the road where you'd hand over the papers, which had to be, you had to have about 5 copies of them or something. And if you didn't have the right number of copies or the right stamp on the right bit of paper, it was like
all procedural.
It was like something in a Soviet supermarket.
Yeah.
It was just crackers. But the point is, it wasn't rocket science. But there was no book that told you that. You had to. So. That was it, and again, as you say, find the court. Well, my colleague Laura and I gave a talk in Manchester regional meeting, or the Northwest regional meeting, a couple of weeks ago, and that was one of the slides we had because, we got to Paris for the oral hearing on the first case to have been filed in the Paris Central Division. It wasn't quite the first hearing because a couple of cases overtook us. But we got there, and everybody's seen the beautiful pictures of the Paris court on the UPC website. But what they don't tell you is how to get into the place. And after doing 2, if not 3 laps of the entire building, which is a city block, we eventually figured out that the only way into this building was these sort of dull grey green doors on the back with no sign. Yeah. And we sort of gingerly, crept in there and walked through a building site. And actually it turned out once you get in there, the people were lovely and very welcoming. But, if that had been the day of the hearing, we'd have been in a pickle.
Yeah.
So people need to, that's what we want to teach people really, just get people the confidence to know how to do it.
Dare we talk about where things might one day go with the UPC in the UK?
I was thinking about it. We can always edit it out if it doesn't feel right.
There's tiny talk, isn't there, about just investigating that possibility a little bit more. I think council's position would be support not being the primary driver. But Rob, what do you reckon? What do you think? Should we go for it?
Well, I certainly think it would be a good thing if it could happen. I can't see any real downside. I mean, the UK was always going to be in the UPC.
Yeah.
It was only a result of Brexit. Well, a political decision that was taken.
It was a political decision, actually. It wasn't even a result of Brexit. Yeah.
So I mean, there were a lot of smart people who thought we could negotiate a way to stay in the UPC. And I have to say, when you talk to judges and people involved in the UPC, they seem to be very welcoming to us from the UK. I should say that's one thing I haven't sensed. Is there hasn't been any kind of, what are you guys doing here?
Yeah.
They seem to be very keen, and I think we're sort of reciprocating that by supporting the UPC very strongly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a sort of win-win for everybody. There's a practical question rather than a legal question or a political question.
Yeah.
There's no, there seems to be nothing but positives for that. There are opportunities for English solicitors and barristers to get more involved, as well as our members. Our fellows, I should say. We've got lots of members who are solicitors and barristers. So that's an opportunity. I think I've certainly heard UPC judges, actually in relation to Ireland, saying we wish Ireland would jolly well hurry up and join because we need some common law judges who can tell us what some of these bits of the rules mean. Yeah. Because obviously quite a lot of the rules are based on English legal concepts. Yeah. It's not a civil law system, it's very much a hybrid system. So there'd be massive advantages in terms of getting some, top judges involved. So there's every practical reason to do it, then you just run into the politics and
we will need the political will. I mean,
yeah.
we're seeing that move at the moment.
Today, isn't it?
A central feature in this has always been the sort of primacy of the CJEU.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that that's becoming less of an issue in other sort of areas of
with the trade
industry and
deals
commerce in
now.
terms of
Yeah.
trade.
Yeah,
and all
I'm
that
guessing you're thinking about the food. I mean, that ultimately, I assume that means we're going to agree to follow what the CJEU rules about the food rules.
And in any case, UPC cases seem to not find themselves there.
Well, there hasn't. The UPC courts haven't referred a single case to the CJEU yet. And as someone who tried to persuade them to do it, they don't seem terribly interested.
I picked up somewhere they don't really want to
No.
because they know that the expertise isn't there. And then I'm not good on this. There's some fine point that you can only refer things up. That's a point of EU law, which is not. And there isn't any.
The really important point that people need to understand, which is spelled out in a number of judgments, not least the Microsoft judgment regarding representation by in-house representatives, is that it's not an EU court.
Yeah.
You know, it is subject in certain respects to the supremacy of EU law, but it's not an EU court, and it has its own, basically enforces its own law. I mean, the articles of the UPC agreement set out patent infringement law, and the EPC effectively sets out patent validity law. So you know, most of the law is its own. So I think that's very important, because people, you know, no doubt if we do try and support a campaign to rejoin, there will be people trying to call it an EU court, which it isn't.
Yeah. Even I saw a report from the Fordham conference, which is that big ticket one it's either in New York or is it Cambridge? Anyway, whichever, this year, and I think some of the UPC judges were asked what their regrets were, and they said that they don't get that alternative approach available from the UK system, because we were so instrumental in setting it up. But at the moment, my feeling is that all the lovely little British bits we put in, the common law bits have a risk of withering, aren't they? So we need to watch that.
Yeah, I think there is, because people, I guess that's a risk, isn't it? If you've got judges who aren't used to thinking, I want to hear this witness being cross-examined, or I wish somebody had ordered, requested disclosure of this evidence, or whatever. I mean, that is the risk. I should say, one of the cases one of my colleagues was involved with, they did actually call expert witnesses, and there was a limited amount of cross-examination. It was quite controlled, but it did happen. So those things are still happening. But I'm sure it would be good to have the judges matching the law.
Gwilym's looking at me because he knows I've got an eye on the time, because I'm timekeeper.
I was actually checking your heart rate.
Timekeeping is one of the things that I do, Rob, and we're coming towards the end of time. But I've got a closer, unless you've got one.
No, do it.
So, do you want to say more?
I want to say one thing, which is really that simple message: our members should get involved in the UPC. That's what we're all about. That's what the committee is trying to do.
We'll make that the tagline for this podcast, Rob.
Thank you.
We get lots of the stuff you said about the UPC out and use it in snippets, which has been really good.
Yeah.
But we'd like to have a little fun closer, which has got something to do with something we've talked about, but maybe only tangentially. I'm going to ask Gwilym and then ask you, and then Gwilym will surprise me by asking me, and I'll surprise Gwilym by my answer. That's the way it works. So it's a tried and tested formula. We were talking a little bit about school and stuff like that. And I don't know what your favourite subject was at school. What was your favourite subject at school?
It was actually English.
English?
Bizarrely. Come back to your point, though. I had decent literacy skills as a result, and that does feed into this job quite well. No, I really enjoyed English. I only did it up to GCSE. I did history A level. But history for me is like science English, you know what I mean? It's more factual. No, I really loved English.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that.
No, I was
I thought you'd be sciencey geeky.
I was twice winner of the school poetry prize.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you're going to write some poetry for me at some point. Oh, you did yesterday about ducks. You did yesterday about ducks.
I probably should repeat that one though.
No. Rob, favourite subject at school? Can't be physics or anything.
History.
History?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a fantastic history teacher. First, probably 2 or 3 of my years at high school. Really fantastic history teacher. Always loved it. Yeah, I mean, I remember being torn because, of course, again, for people who aren't from the UK listening to this, may not know that you have to choose 3 subjects when you're 16. Yeah. Which is bonkers. So it is if you're me, it's bonkers. Yeah. Because I wanted to study physics and history, but there's no university that'll let you in if you've got A-level physics and history, because you don't know enough other artsy stuff to do history, and you don't know enough science to do physics. So that was, they were my two favourite subjects. So I had to just can the history and go down the sort of sciencey route.
I don't know to say, I got into university with physics and history.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, I never told me
maths,
that.
and maths.
Oh, maths, yeah. I should have done that. I might have gone.
Sorry to break. No, you
I'm-
can still go back. You can still do history.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
go back.
I think what I realised is that you can kind of read history books. You can't read physics books.
Fair point. Go on.
Latin.
Oh, shush.
So
Really?
yeah, so I went to City of Portsmouth Boys' School. Doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Yeah, kind
Oh,
of
nor does Latin, really. I mean,
back end of Pompey, rough as it comes.
Pompeii.
But it only taught Latin because it just happened to have a teacher who was a classicist
Oh, wow.
who taught Latin. Sadly, we stopped doing it in my second year at City Boys because he died in a motorbike accident.
Oh, no.
So his name was Bomber Whiteley because he used to wear a bomber jacket and his surname was Whiteley. And he was about 4'6", 7".
He sounds amazing.
But drove this massive Harley Davidson bike and would I got my Caecilius Estin Atrio and all that sort of malarkey, and I used to love my Latin lessons.
That's
Of course,
fascinating.
it never made any impact on me because it stopped after he died. So we stopped learning it.
You've told me elsewhere that you've got a bit of German.
Yeah, the German as well.
And I would have said that the Latin grammar must have helped you. with the German.
Definitely. Yeah. But yeah, so Rob, thank you so much for spending your time on the podcast. I've been wanting to get you on for ages, so it's a bit of a success story for me. Gwilym, see you on the next one, mate.
In
A few minutes.
hey.